The rain poured relentlessly as Clara stepped out of the sleek black car, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. The towering skyscraper loomed before her, its glass facade reflecting the stormy sky. 6 years, 6 long years since she had last stood here, heartbroken and betrayed. But now she was no longer the naive young woman who had been cast aside. She was stronger, fiercer, and she had a secret that would shake the very foundation of the man who had destroyed her. Inside the penthouse office, Alexander Grant, the billionaire CEO of Grant Industries, was finalizing a multi-million-dollar deal. His sharp blue eyes scanned a contract, his mind as calculating as ever. But the moment his assistant announced an unexpected visitor, his world tilted. "Clara?" he whispered, his voice barely audible as she strode into the room, her presence commanding attention. She was no longer the timid girl he remembered. Her eyes burned with determination, and by her side stood 2 small children, a boy and a girl, no older than 5, with his unmistakable, piercing blue eyes. "Hello, Alexander," Clara said, her voice cold and steady. "Meet your children." The room fell silent. Alexander's face paled as he stared at the twins, their resemblance to him undeniable. His mind raced, memories flooding back. The night they had spent together, the promises he had made, and the way he had callously discarded her when she no longer fit into his carefully curated life. You never told me," he stammered, his voice trembling. Clara's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You didn't give me the chance. You threw me out like I was nothing. But now, it's my turn to show you what it feels like to lose everything." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, slamming it onto his desk. Inside were documents detailing his company's illegal dealings, evidence that could ruin him and everything he had built. Alexander's heart pounded as he realized the gravity of the situation. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara leaned in, her eyes blazing. "I want you to feel the pain you caused me. I want you to beg for forgiveness, to know what it's like to have your world torn apart. But most of all, I want you to acknowledge your children and take responsibility for the life you abandoned." Alexander sank into his chair, his once impenetrable facade crumbling. For the first time in his life, he was at a loss for words. The twins, oblivious to the tension, looked up at him with curious eyes, their innocence a stark contrast to the storm raging around them. "Please," he finally whispered, his voice breaking, "I'll do anything. Just don't destroy everything I've worked for." Clara straightened, her gaze unwavering. "This isn't about revenge anymore, Alexander. It's about justice. For me, for our children, and for everyone you've hurt along the way." As the rain continued to fall outside, the billionaire CEO was left with a choice: to face the consequences of his actions or to fight a battle he could never win. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Grant found himself on his knees, begging for a second chance. The backstory. 6 years earlier, Clara had been a bright-eyed intern at Grant Industries, full of dreams and aspirations. Alexander, the charismatic and powerful CEO, had taken an interest in her. Their whirlwind romance had been intense, filled with passion and promises. But when Clara became pregnant, Alexander's demeanor changed. He accused her of trying to trap him, of using the pregnancy to secure her future. He had her fired and cut off all contact, leaving her to face the world alone. Heartbroken and determined, Clara moved away, vowing to rebuild her life. She gave birth to twins, Emma and Ethan, and poured all her love and energy into raising them. Over the years, she built a successful career, but the pain of Alexander's betrayal never faded. She knew she had to confront him not just for herself, but for her children. The confrontation. As Alexander stared at the twins, a flood of emotions overwhelmed him. He had always prided himself on his control, his ability to manipulate any situation to his advantage. But this was beyond his control. The evidence Clara had gathered was damning, and he knew that if it were made public, his empire would crumble. "Clara, I didn't know," he said, his voice filled with regret. "If I had known about the children, I would have—" "Would have what?" Clara interrupted, her voice sharp. "Would have taken them away from me? Would have tried to buy their love? You had your chance, Alexander, and you threw it away." The twins, sensing the tension, clung to Clara's legs. She knelt down, her expression softening as she looked at them. "It's okay, my loves. Mommy's just having a grown-up conversation." Alexander watched the interaction, a pang of guilt and longing piercing his heart. He had always been driven by ambition, by the desire to build an empire. But now, faced with the reality of his own children, he realized how empty his life had been. "Clara, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve it, but give me a chance to make things right. For the children." Clara stood, her eyes narrowing. "You think you can just waltz back into our lives and play the doting father? It's not that simple, Alexander. You need to earn their trust just like you need to earn mine." The resolution. Over the next few months, Alexander worked tirelessly to prove himself. He stepped down from his position as CEO, allowing a new leader to take the helm and clean up the company's illegal dealings. He devoted himself to getting to know Emma and Ethan, spending time with them, and slowly earning their trust. Clara watched cautiously, her heart torn between hope and fear. She had seen the damage Alexander could cause, but she also saw the genuine effort he was making to change. For the sake of her children, she was willing to give him a chance. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about healing, about building a future for the twins that was filled with love and stability. And as Alexander knelt before Clara, begging for forgiveness, she realized that sometimes the greatest revenge was finding peace and moving forward. The storm outside had passed, and a new chapter was beginning, one where the past was acknowledged, but the future held the promise of redemption.